As far as I'm concerned, you should be gone just because of that, because you're violating ethics. Again, I can't wait to see what happens when all this finally settles down. Half of you, again, I don't know why you're on the board, other than to just lambaste him and prevent him from doing his job. Terry, I appreciate you stepping up last week. It was great seeing you as president. No offense, Ms. Bloom, you weren't here. Terry did a great job. I will say that. But this budget, I can't wait to see these numbers. I can't wait. I'm scared to death that my taxes are going to go up again, exponentially potentially, and you're still going to cut. I can't wait to see these numbers, and I want to hear anybody's explanation on the other side that voted for that contract. Granted, I get it. Everybody deserves a raise. In this environment, maybe you should have renegotiated the numbers a little bit better than just giving a blank slate to everybody. Because when the numbers come in, nobody has the right to get mad that voted on this contract. Because if these numbers come out that I'm thinking of off the top of my head, I think we're going to face an $8 million deficit, even with the increase in state aid. We got to cut it from somewhere. Where's it going to cut from? You can't cut administration anymore. That's already down to the bones. So guess what? Staff and teachers are potentially going to get cut again. And when it hits the fan, those of you that agreed on this negotiation with the contract, I don't want to hear a word from you, because you agreed for these exorbitant contracts. Granted, I told you, a certain amount of money is great for a raise, but in the financial distress that this district and other districts are in, for you to agree to that, now you're going to see what's going to happen. And as a taxpayer, I'm already furious because my taxes went up last year and we still cut. So now we're going to do it again. And then we're going to do it again, probably for the next 3 years because of the contract that was agreed to. So I don't know how much time I have left, so I apologize because I didn't see a clock. But in closing, yeah, I hope that the people that are on this board that are doing the right thing for this district, keep doing what you're doing, keep fighting it. And the people that aren't here for the right reasons, just step down and resign. You have more parents out there that would love to do this job and make this district better. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lindsay. I want to assure you that we do know about the curriculum and that will be taken care of. It's not that we're not going to take care of it, so be assured that that will be taken care of, because everyone up here knows it's an important position, and we are working, as we did just now in our executive, to have that solved for the district. So thank you. Anybody else? Okay. I guess not. Okay. Motion to close to the public?
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, motion carried. Now let's begin the budget retreat. This is new for, I think, a lot of us. I think a lot of us have never had one of these before, but we're happy that administration has worked with us to get this, for us to be able to hear everything together. So thank you to the administration for that.
Okay, we put together a couple of slides, mainly to go over timeline, to go over some of the major projections as far as revenue, talk about surplus and fund balance, so you know where we are moving forward. And then when we, and just for the public, when we go back into executive session, the focus would be on personnel related items that wouldn't be able to be discussed in open session at this point. So it's just a quick agenda. We have budget timeline. It's fast and furious this time of the year. State aid that we just got last week, a couple days ago. We'll talk about local fair share, the revenue projection, which obviously drives the expense side of the budget. I wanted to talk about fund balance and food service, mostly because you know, you'll see that in the revenue projection, and it does affect the budget moving forward. Salary benefit increases and health benefits. Oh, God, yeah. Sorry. Which drives the majority of our budget. 75 to 80% is salary and benefits. And, that's a big budget driver. And then just finish with enrollment before we get into the personnel items.
Question.
Yeah.
The health benefits, have they changed it, or can you still do a waiver and it goes outside of the 2%?
Yes, you can still do a waiver, so I'll talk about that with you guys. And the way it works is, it's an adjustment. It's a tax levy adjustment. So any portion of your increase that's over 2%, but under the state health benefits increase, you're allowed to add to your tax levy. So in essence, you can go above 2% for that dollar amount. This year, the state health benefits increase is 31.8 or 31.9%. We're well under that, but still not in a good spot. So we should be able to take a good portion of the increase, which again, it depends on how you look at it. To me, it's good because if we can cover that increase, it's less that you have to cut, but I know other people might not see it the same way. But I'll definitely go over that with you. And then get a consensus on if that's something you want us to work into the budget.
Did you take a waiver last year?
Last year we did not, and that was mainly because even though we had an increase in our health benefits, we were still under the state health benefits because of the cuts and reductions. It didn't equate to anything. The year before we did, it was about $833,000. This is a budget timeline. I just wanted to go over this again because it's a little bit fast and furious. On the 10th, the governor had the budget address. On the 12th, we received our state aid figures, and I have some slides on that. You probably have seen it already, but I do have some slides. Next week is when our committee meetings will be more focused on the budget, so there'll be, we can dig into, just for the board, a lot more of the details. Anything that you talk about today that you want more details, we can certainly add it to the agenda. And then, let's see, March 24th is the work session. That's when we'll have our tentative budget presentation. All these dates are a little bit later than they've been in the past because the governor's budget address was later. March 27th is when the tentative budget has to be submitted to the county office. And then on April 28th will be the public hearing and final adoption. Just keep in mind that the tentative budget, we do the presentation and then we have to submit it because a tentative budget has to be reviewed and approved by the county superintendent before it can be publicly adopted. So we do have changes sometimes between the tentative budget presentation and the public hearing. Last year we had the tax levy incentive. Sometimes it's just we get final numbers on health benefits and things like that. And then, so you can change the budget, but at the public hearing, you have to present what those changes were because the tentative budget is what gets advertised. So I just wanted to make sure we go through that. So we do still have a whole lot of time to do this. This is a slide you're used to seeing every year. It's the history of our state aid. I added 26-27. We did see a net increase of 1.5 million. You probably saw a different number advertised, and I'll show you that on the next slide. But these are the main categories of state aid. So you can see transportation aid and special education aid increased. Transportation aid decreased slightly. Special education aid increased. For those categories, they are calculating it, relying more on the actual enrollment you have, which is good for us. Transportation aid decreased a little bit, I think mainly because that's calculated off of the number of students and also the miles and the length of our routes, and it gets kind of technical. But the good news for us was where the equalization aid is in the past, that's the category that has been reduced as a result of S2 from all the years that we were considered overfunded. And then last year, we got penalized because we were under our local fair share. We still are this year, which I will explain that as well, but we did get an increase in our equalization aid for this year. So again, the net just in these categories was 1.5 million, and then obviously you can see the loss over the past 10 years. Yes.
The enrollment numbers that they go off of for the calculation, does that include pre-K numbers?
It does not. So when you, our resident, it goes off of resident enrollment, and you have to be careful with that because resident enrollment removes preschool because our preschool aid is based on per pupil for those students. So they're taken out. It also doesn't include students that are received because they pay tuition, so obviously we wouldn't get state aid, but you know, a lot of those you have to figure into your enrollment and your actual costs. Do you want to go to the next one?
And that's the money that you get every year annually.
Right. And that is on this slide. So this is just a quick recap. So what I did was I just summarized the top part is what was on the other slide. And you can see where it says total state aid, the increase is 1,765,000. That's probably what you saw advertised. But the reason why you'll see 1.5 in our revenue projection is because the part in the middle, the other aid, last year we received 252,000 in additional aid as a result of taking the tax levy incentive. I don't know if you guys remember that, but they gave you like a small percentage. So, you know, the net figures, I just wanted to explain why you'll see 1.5 in the condensed version of our revenue. And then our preschool, I wanted to make sure I showed this too, because a lot of times there's a misunderstanding that we're getting, you know, a windfall of additional aid, which it's great news that we're getting additional preschool education aid, but that's based on the increase in the number of students we're expecting next year. So remember, we, for next year, we hope to open another building. So the application we submitted was for additional classrooms, additional students, and that funding is a strictly per pupil basis. So that increase is a result of new students and new expenses and new staff. Yeah, so the preschool aid, we can't rely on anything else. It's only to fund your preschool program. It doesn't include the special education costs related to the students that may be in those programs. So it can only be used to pay for their supplies, their PD, their staff, anything within the preschool aid. It cannot help our general fund in any way.
And over the course of the last few years, when we opened Kindle, and then hopefully when we successfully open Walls, it's the additional creation of jobs for us as well. So obviously, if we go back to this slide, you can, Janine, if we're talking about the S2 reductions, we're talking about it's the equalization aid,
Yes.
right? So you can see.
And the adjustment aid.
Yep. So when you
That went away.
When you take a look at that, so if you go all the way back to 17 and 18, you can see our equalization aid was approximately 38 million, and then the adjustment aid was about 2.5 million. Well, clearly you can see in 1920, all of the adjustment aid went from 2.5 to 1 to nothing all the way through, and then you can see that our equalization aid was at 38 and worked its way all the way down in 25, 26 into the $28 million range. All of those were cuts for us. And you know, it started off where we, you know, we lost money, and then we had to lose vacant positions that were attached to money, and eventually it worked its way into staff cuts because there was nothing else left to cut. So the opening of those buildings has allowed us to have a safe landing spot for some of our employees if we had to cut from one area to allow them to move to another area.
Yeah, sometimes, so if you go, the 252 was a result of when we used the tax levy incentive. Going all the way back to 17, 18, that was just some other kind of, one-shot infusion. I can't remember what it was back then, but it was just another category that was added just for that year in particular.
And if you take a look at the increase decrease, Janine, the line that you're talking about, the 1513844, sorry, progressive lenses, under 2627, that's the difference between the extra 252,000
Yeah.
that you're referring.
Yeah.
Everybody okay?
And then, okay, just some information on our local fair share. Last year, when we were 10 million or so under our local fair share, we did increase the tax levy, and we used part of that, and this amount was left unused. For this year, we haven't heard anything about, getting to our local fair share. One of the reasons why we spoke to our legislators and tried to advocate not only to allow us to use it, but also we asked to be more timely with it. I don't know if you remember from last year, it's devastating to submit a tentative budget and have cuts and have to give people notices, and then suddenly you're allowed to fix it in some way. And then the other reason we advocated for it is because last year, because we were under our local fair share, we were actually penalized on our state aid. So we lost the maximum 3%. So to be honest, I was surprised that we didn't get penalized, because I assumed, now the local fair share is calculated by a number of drivers that has to do with your, the income of your residents and your ratables and those kinds of things. And it's an average of the past 3 years. So I assumed there was going to be a little bit of a change, but I thought we would still be under by around the 5 million. I think the difference is just that there was more funding that was worked into the formula this year, and moving toward a better reliance on the actual number of students. Yeah.
I just really want to be clear for the
Yes.
public, because of the way it's phrased. Last year left on the table, the local fair share is what the state government believes we should be taxing our
Correct.
neighbors. And we didn't ask for that money from
Correct.
the community.
Correct.
So when it says left on the table, I just want everyone in the public to be clear. It's not that we were saying we don't want this money. We increased taxes 7% and we're cringing the entire way we were doing
Right.
that. We could have added more tax is basically what this means. So I just want to be clear to everyone who's watching and listening.
Yeah, so last year when we were given the opportunity to increase it, and obviously we had devastating cuts, as a board, we sat down in committees and developed a bunch of scenarios of different areas where we felt like we really needed to add back for safety, for security. So we came up with the dollar amount that we felt would be the best for the district and, with the least impact to the taxpayers. So this year, go ahead.
That 5.2 would have been about another, 4%, 4 or 5%? Like if we were at 7,
Yeah,
it would
yes,
have been about
yes.
11, right?
Yeah, because it was about half. We
Yeah.
took about half. So we don't know what's going to happen. We did hear from one person who seemed to think we were not going to have the opportunity at the tax levy incentive for this year because of, the governor doesn't want any new taxes, which I understand. So we don't know that yet. That's, still a question mark.
I just have a quick question. So when we increased, or when the board increased the taxes last year by the percent, and there was, more opportunity and to make sure we didn't raise taxes, right, it stayed there. Does that become the new floor if you use any part of the incentive? So even if the incentive becomes part of the floor, that's not a one-year thing. That moves the, okay.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah. So it becomes part of your tax base. that you calculate your 2% for the following year. So yes, it definitely helps because it increases, that amount stays. The only thing that goes is the amount that we didn't use, it doesn't carry to the next year. So that causes confusion for some people, because if you look at the details of our budget document, it shows that it's available for the following years. That's just how that works. But when you actually, they tell us it's one and done, like now's your only chance. Obviously, it gets recalculated, but for last year, we had the opportunity, we picked what we wanted, and then the rest was off the table. And then what happens is when you go into the next year and go into the budget document, it does not carry forward, so we're not able to use the amount from the year before. So, go ahead.
Like it's, the term you often hear is banked cap, right? So
Yes,
that doesn't go into bank
that's what it's
cap, and there
called.
is
It
no
does not.
bank cap available
Correct.
to tap.
Correct.
And this comes up every year, it seems. So Julie is completely right. You know, the 7% tax raise was a lot. That would have added probably 4-ish% to that. That money was not utilized. It is no longer accessible. Bank cap, we have 0. It is quantifiable. It has been corroborated and confirmed by the executive county superintendent. It has happened in Janine's meetings and our meetings that leftover money is not accessible. And for us, we don't have access to any other bank cap, not a dollar, correct?
No, we don't have any from previous years. So the only thing we'll have this year is what they call what's generated. It'll be what we generate in 26, 27. So for example, there's only going to be 2 possibilities. When I enter health benefits and get all that squared away, it'll most likely calculate an adjustment. So that'll appear as something created in 26, 27. If we use that, then it's done. If we don't, that will carry forward for the next 3 years. The only other option we would have as being created in the current year is if they give us the use of the tax levy incentive, and then that will appear as being allowed to use as well. But right now, we don't have anything carried from the year before.
So for this upcoming budget year, the difference that we think, right, because we don't know the local fair share, or is that the local
Well, we
fair
do.
share?
So I was just going to get to that. So
Sorry.
where I have this year's information, the local fair share is on our state aid notice. So I don't know if I circulated that with you, to you guys, but I can. Because the one page gives you all the multipliers to come up with that. So the local fair share on our state aid notices says our tax levy should be 112 million that you see up there. If we take last year's tax levy, which was about 105, and add a 2% increase, that brings it up to 107, which means that difference is what we're under our local fair share as of right now, until we do something else.
Does anybody have any questions on bank cap? We want to make sure we explain that all the way.
Okay. Moving on. Okay, our revenue projection. Couple things I want to hit here. When you look up at the screen, it looks good. There's actually a $10 million change. What I want to caution everybody, and I'll get more into this on another slide, is fund balance. So fund balance is when you close each budget year, it's the total of any excess revenue you have and any unspent appropriations. There's a calculation that's done for a minimum amount that's in your unassigned fund balance that you're to keep. It's 2% of your operating budget. For us, that's only between, it usually falls, again, because it depends on your operating budget, but it's anywhere between $3.5 and $4 million.
We have no option for that.
Yes, and just so you know too, just to give you some perspective on that, again, if it's around $3 million, right, you get to the end of the year, in the summer, you're trying to make payroll. The state does not give us our state aid payments in June. They actually withhold them, and they don't give them to us. So we're trying to get through the summer without that cash flow, and also just one of our payrolls is $4 million. So having that safety net is critical. And then, so the fund balance you see up there, that is a result of our 24-25 budget, what we had left at the end of the year when you, again, when you collapse the revenue and the appropriation side of the budget, it's what we had left over and above the 2% that we're supposed to keep. Now, that is good news in the short term because you can use it, well, you have to use it. You have to use it in your budget. What's risky about it, and we've learned this from the past as we've spent down our surplus, if you don't replenish it, then when you go to do next year's budget, if that number isn't there, it's an automatic deficit. So we have to be careful, and there's a couple recommendations we have. And I also want to show you the total fund balance because you have to understand our picture as a whole. So our fund balance as a whole is still declining. That's why we have to be careful to replenish that.
And as is our credit rating, correct?
Correct. Our credit rating did get downgraded. So last year, I think in the fall, maybe I had talked about this at a meeting. I went on a couple of meetings with S&P to discuss our finances after the 23-24 audit was filed. And, you know, as our surplus has been declining, they told us that they were looking to see our surplus numbers increase and would possibly downgrade our credit. I had to go on a couple of more meetings as a result of the ESIP that we just did and the borrowing. In early to mid-January, we were finalizing our 24-25 audit. So even though this was good news because it did give us money to use in our budget, our overall fund balance still decreased almost $3 million. So the S&P decided to not fully downgrade a rating, but they gave us a negative outlook. That wasn't enough to affect the borrowing that we just did, but they were pretty clear if we don't start increasing, that doesn't mean having excess that we can use, it means increasing our overall surplus, it will get downgraded and that could affect us in the future. So we have to be careful, we have to think long-term, we have to think about ways to replenish that and you know, just ways to make sure we remain fiscally healthy.
I think before Scott jumps in, that's some of the recommendations we made in the past have been aimed at doing just that, of making sure that we ended up back in that positive space versus in that negative space. Because right now we don't put much into maintenance and capital. We're going to talk about how we're actually going to have to utilize some of that fund balance to make sure that we're okay moving forward. But again, that's the risk that Janine talks about. When you're in that zone, you have to make it up the following year or it's going to be a budget cut then, correct?
Yeah, yeah.
And the year-over-year trend on that fund balance number is close to last year, a little lower than last year?
No, so so you see for 25-26,
Yeah.
it was zero.
Zero. And then
So-
prior to that,
Prior to that, it was around 10.5 million.
10.5, right? So we went from
Yeah.
10.5 to 0, and now we're back to 7.4, 7.5.
Right, so
which is-
and also, I wanted to point out, when we were up to the 10.5, it was from 2 different budget years.
Yeah.
And again, and this is where we have to be careful, when you get to a low amount like we are, you know, we're cutting operating expenses, which is a small portion. If you figure 75% of our budget is salary and benefits, and then the other 25%, you have categories like tuition, transportation, utilities, things that you can't necessarily control. It leaves very, very little for the buildings. So over the years, we've dwindled down supplies. So obviously, they're going to spend most of the supply money. They're not, you know, they're not going to leave any as a savings for the following year. So that's just why we have to be super careful.
Janine,
You don't, and then, go ahead.
I was just going to say, for people that are trying to understand what all this is, can you explain again, just very clearly, like briefly, why you would not be able to take 5.6 million in the gap of local fair share from the fund balance. I'm not in favor of doing that. I just want to say, for people that are sitting watching again, the fund balance has 7.5 million. The state is saying the gap in what our taxpayers should be paying and what they're actually paying is 5.6. So someone might say, well, just take it out of there, don't raise our taxes. Can you explain again why it's important to keep that money?
To keep the surplus money?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so first of all, it's two different buckets. They're going to look at that 112 million that was on the other screen. That's strictly based off of our ratables and our income, our area income. And then this is fund balance. So when I was talking about things like cash flow and, you know, what if you have emergencies? In some of the years where we dwindled that down, not only did we have a budget that, you know, was very lean and we were worried about just handling basic price increases, you can't handle emergencies. You can't handle, you know, a huge, you know, what did we have last year with the chillers, a $70,000, did I?
Gym floors, $50 million.
Yeah. Jim, yes, thank you, Julie. That's,
So-
you know,
So I think, Julie, it's not just the public. I'm trying to learn my first budget season too, right? So the difference between those two buckets of numbers, right? So the 7.4 million is you budgeted conservatively, and when everything shook out at the end of the year, there was 7.4 after that budget cleared that we have. That doesn't, right, your savings account. It doesn't change our tax base, right? So if, say it's $100, not $7.4 million, someone gives me $100 in cash, that doesn't mean I can afford an ongoing $100 expense
Yeah,
every year
yes.
because my income didn't really change, even though I now have this new,
Yeah.
like, one-time influx of
so,
cash.
so if you think of it this way too, and I will get more into the fund balance, and I just want to touch on a couple of these other categories too. Think of it like, you know, you make a certain amount during the year and you have your bills, and at the end of the year, let's say it's $100,000, and then at the end of the year, you have $10,000 left. You go into the next year and you still have your bills, and you're saying, well, I'm going to use that money for a new roof, right? So you're going to spend more, you're going to spend that savings in the next year on the roof, right? But you would want to spend that, it's leftover money, you would want to spend it on something that you're not going to have to spend every year. You wouldn't want to go out and buy, you know, a yacht and have to continue to pay for it if, you know, it was a one-shot infusion, and you don't know at the end of the following year if you're going to have $10,000 left.
And it's two very different things. Fund balance is exactly what you said. It's normal for school districts to have money. If they didn't have money, that would be a massive issue. There would be state intervention. Where our fund balance goes to, it will go to funding our next year's budget in some portion, and a teeny bit will go, hopefully, to capital upon your, you know, our recommendation to you. But we're nowhere near where we should be. The difference between that and the local fair share is simply, that is the number, right or wrong, that they are saying that we could conceivably tax the residents of Washington Township, and that would be what their local fair share is. Now, as Janine mentioned, it's about $4 plus $5-ish million depending for the local fair share that we're not taking, and we might not have the access to take, and that would of course be a board decision. But they're two very different buckets. So for anyone to say or look at that number and be like, well, you had $7.4 million, you're awesome. No, we're not, because millions of that are going to have to go into the next budget to offset, to make sure that we're okay due to all of our contractual increases and other increases that we have. Tuition, and we took great steps with the energy audit, transportation, the rising costs of everything. So we are, in Janine's example, we're relying upon the extra, and we're buying a whole new car payment that's not in the budget, or roof, as you gave the example of.
Janine, how does the state come up with a fair share? Can you explain, how do they come up with that?
They take the last 3 years of your ratables, so like the value of the property in town, and then the last 3 years of the income base of the town. And like I said, I can share that state aid notice. There's a whole page on that. It's how our equalization aid is calculated.
So we get notified by the state, but that's the one where no one actually knows, like, the hard numbers that goes into calculating the local fair share?
Yeah, I think what you hear sometimes is that sometimes when you ask for where the numbers come from, that's not always clear. I'll say that.
Because like you said, it's based on the ratables and the income, right?
Yes.
So even though it's affecting our ratables and our property taxes, it also takes into consideration the income in the area.
Yes, yes. When we did last year, it's hard to say, because like I said, we did get closer to the local fair share, obviously, because, you know, when you add they're saying, and I believe, if I'm not mistaken, last year it was around 112 million that they were saying our local fair share was. So we're getting closer by what we're doing. We're not there yet. I think it's the amount of money that was put in to run the formula, and just the fact that they're getting closer in some areas. What was happening for years is that, like, transportation aid and special education aid, it just remained flat for everyone. Everyone's got the same for like 10 years. And the equalization aid portion was the one that changed. Last year, I believe, was where we got the increase, was the first year that those two categories increased, but we still got hit with a bigger decrease in equalization aid. It netted out to only a 3% decrease. So, you know, definitely good news. The formula is the same, so we don't know what they will do going forward. But obviously, it's you know, a blessing for this year, because if you look up there, I'll just go through the other categories real quick. You know, obviously, we have the fund balance, so we're utilizing our savings. The local tax levy, right now I have 2% in there. Like I said, we will have the opportunity to take an adjustment for our healthcare increase, which I'll get into that. I don't know if we'll have anything else. State aid, I explained why it's a net increase of 1.5, because we did have that little portion that, as of right now, we don't have for this year. But that obviously is an increase we haven't had in the past. Extraordinary aid is, we're budgeting a little bit less this year. That is something that we get reimbursed for special education students that have a certain cost associated with them. We never know the amount because we can't apply for it until May of that school year, and we don't actually get it until August of the following school year. But what's been happening is we've been getting less and less due to the percentage of our totals that we get. And so in the 24-25 budget, you'll see, if you took a look at the audit, we budgeted 2.5 million, which seemed sufficient compared to other years, but we only ended up with, I believe, 2.2 million. Again, and it's just a result, we submit the total costs, and then the state only has a certain pot of money, and then based on the applications, they decide the percentage that everyone gets. So we can't, again, when you don't have a lot of surplus and your surplus is declining, you can't afford to be under in any of these projections. And then the only other fluctuation kind of worth talking about is in restricted miscellaneous, and this is basically because that's where our gate fees are for athletics, and because of you know, what we've done so far, we are increasing that a little bit. Okay. This is a recap of our fund balance. I wanted to go through this. And first, I'll point out, if you look at the bottom, and for those of you in the business committee, you probably remember this because the auditor went over this with us. If you look at the totals, when we closed out 23-24, we had a total of over 17 million. And then at the end of 24-25, we're sitting under 15. So that's one of the things that when S&P saw our 24-25 statements, obviously, you know, I knew that that was going to be a concern. You know, I was slightly optimistic because we did have some left over, and I knew it would help us for our budget, but it's not a long-term fix at all, and it's something that we need to keep our eye on and do something about. Some of the categories that you see up there, so on the left-hand side, you see the 7.4 million. That's what was generated in 24-25 over and above the amount that we're allowed to keep, so you have to use it in the next budget, which would be the 26-27 budget that we're working on now. The next one down, the prior year excess surplus, that's what would have been generated in a previous year, but was used in the 24-25 budget. That's the same for the number that you see almost at the bottom, the 4.2 million, where it says used in current budget. That was also used in the 24-25 budget. And remember, in 25-26, when we built that budget, we didn't have any excess left. We had unassigned, but we didn't have excess. And then capital reserve, we were able to put $1 million in the capital reserve, so that helps. If you remember, over the years, first of all, even the 2.2 million is not sufficient for a district our size. That wouldn't even cover a couple of boilers for us. And in the past couple years, it's been so low, we couldn't even take advantage of some ROD grants because we just didn't have the local fair share. So aside from building up our surplus, we really need to build up our reserves so we have them moving forward. And then you have reserve for unemployment, which looks like a big number, but that we're required to set aside and reserve the employer share for unemployment. And then when we get claims, which we do, we have to pay it out of those accounts. And then the unreserved and undesignated is that 2% unassigned that I was talking about. That's the minimum that we have to keep. Okay. So that's that, yes. That is just, so we have to set, whenever you have a capital reserve account, any interest accrued on that money has to stay with the capital reserve. So if you look within our audit document, you always take the balance from the previous year. Did you make any deposits? Did you earn any interest? And then that's how you come up with what's left in there. So that, for budget purposes, we just have to separate that out as a different line item. So even though it's a minimum amount, I always separate it on here so people can match it back up to, we do earn more than that, just so you know. I don't know if that's why you're asking. Yeah. We do earn more than that. You just have to kind of have like a placeholder, like an account, so you can separate it. And then we budget, so in the other, no, you don't have to. And then in other interest just goes into miscellaneous revenue. Yeah. You can go. And then the next slide, I just wanted to go over because there was questions about this, so I wanted to make sure everyone understood because, it does, the way it's presented could be confusing. So this is our food service fund. Food service funds are they operate in a separate fund. They're supposed to operate like a business and support themselves. In this district, our general fund supports the food service, but if you were looking at the financial statements, you might have thought there was net income. There was, but because of our contribution from the general fund. So I just listed out the main categories that you see on the audit statement, just to kind of condense it to make it easier. Operating revenue is what they bring in when kids pay for their meals and they have catering events. Operating expenses is all the expenses it takes to run. The non-operating revenue from state and federal sources is all the subsidies that we get for, whether it's a paid meal, a free meal, or a reduced meal. You have interest, and then the 801,000 is what was transferred from the general fund. So if you look at the statement overall, it looks like there's net income, but they actually had a deficit of 479,000 had it not been for what we sent over from the general fund. So moving forward, one of the things we can do if they have There's a calculation that you do with the cash balance. You're supposed to have a certain cash balance that would cover about 3 months of your operating expenses. So we do keep an eye on that, and if we budget a certain contribution, at the end of the year when we're closing out, we can look if they have sufficient cash, and we can kind of adjust that. And we do that with the auditors at the end of the year. So I just wanted to make sure everyone understood that. Yes, it's salaries, benefits, and food costs is the majority, yeah.
So do you think it's more food costs at this point? Because we have reduced benefits, or how do we change this? Because every year, this is an issue.
Yeah, so the number has come down over the years because of restructuring we've done with the different positions and reduction of benefits. Salary increases, impact it a lot because obviously you can only increase the meal charge by, 10 cents, whatever it is, and then you have salary increase. There are some that still have benefits, and then obviously food costs are increasing as well.
How about when people don't pay for lunches?
So
Haven't you been
that's
working
an
on
issue.
that?
Yeah,
or-
we've been working on that. That's an issue that I think pretty much it is separate.
separate,
It is
okay.
separate. And that's one of those things where it's very difficult. We have been working with families to pay down what they owe. I think a lot of that's skyrocketed for a lot of districts, and much of the reason happened after COVID when meals were free, and then, the reapplication had to be done. There was just, some people didn't do it, and then they racked up charges, and
We can't deny giving a
You
child
can't,
lunch.
yeah.
So, yeah, just to extrapolate, this was a question that happened in public. It's about $500,000 per year. If you project that over several years, you can do the math on that, but we're operating definitely in the red.
I guess my concern with that is, years ago, you got a little card and your parents paid and they punched a card. I wonder how much of an impact it is that now they just have these accounts and kids are charging. And it's not your kids for free and reduced lunch that I'm concerned about. It's the ones who have this card and are just charging, and parents aren't keeping track of it, and all of a sudden they have this large bill. Have we ever thought about going back to a simpler system where, again, you have the little punch card as opposed to the technology that allows them to spend what they don't have?
Yeah, we can flesh this out through policy because there's a clear policy on it. I don't know if the punch card would address that, because the reality is we're not talking about snacks here, but if a child comes in and doesn't have money to buy lunch, we cannot deny them that. So if they go into an arrear, that's where they land. And I will give a massive shout out to Angela at the high school, who's done a great job, and the team. We've really worked hard to try to wrap our head around some of this debt. But the reality is that if a child comes in and they don't have money, we can't deny. And whether they get whatever that lunch is, we're not talking about snacks, whether it was a punch card or whether it was an electronic system, it wouldn't matter. It would still tally into the arrear.
And I think we all agree with that, sitting here, that that's a priority. I guess my thing was that the extras that are charged, or I also hear, and again, when my kids went to school, it was ancient, we didn't serve breakfast. But that's another area where kids are, I know from my own grandchildren, are taking breakfast, and mom doesn't know that they're taking breakfast because they ate breakfast at home, and all this is going into this data.
I can say too, from my experience, having a young man that eats a lot, a young teenager, and him and his friends always have had a massive lunch debt. One of his friends had like $2,000 lunch debt, and his parents didn't even know until he wasn't permitted to go to homecoming. That program that we use, do we use school pay schools? I hate pay school. Sorry. That program that we use, I was about to say school bucks because that's what they use at GCIT, and it is much easier. But in pay schools, there's nothing that notifies the parent like, hey, your child has a $100 balance or a $500 balance. So it might just be as simple as they send an email as like an alert, early warning. You know what I mean? Your kid's getting up there in a balance, so you're not just slammed with that, oh my gosh, what did you spend
They
all
are.
this money on?
Warnings go out all the time,
Yeah,
100%.
emails.
Yeah.
So I think we probably, we can talk about this in policy because we do send out emails. We are meeting regularly on this to see how we can address, and work with families individually. So I think maybe this is a good topic for policy, so we can go over the policy and then some of the things that we've been doing internally.
But that's, your rears is not.
Yeah, this is strictly operating. So if you look at obviously your balance sheet, it does affect your balance sheet, and at some point, we're going to have to get to a point where, are we writing it off? What are we doing? But it's not something that's happened in schools a lot. So we're trying to tackle and get it under control, and we can definitely give.
I don't,
I'm not sure.
I don't think that was in the address. I don't think there's anything.
I'll follow up with you, though.
Jersey School Boards has that in their lobbying agenda for this year, that all kids get free lunch. So that would help a lot, but I don't know if how that's moving.
I'll check in on it. The amount that we transferred, I think it was around the same. I think it was in the 800s that we did last year.
And
It was, what we transferred was about even, yeah. Well, let's do that, because we're getting into like the benefits and stuff. Can I update you guys in like business committee on that?
the only
Janine,
other question I have, oh, sorry, go ahead, Scott.
Let's say, the food service report we get in the monthly, that now has a loss or profitability component to it, right? Is that
It
a
does.
reliable number?
The only thing that you have to consider with that is like a budget to actual statement. So at any point in time, like in the beginning of the year, when school gets underway and all of our employees are falling into place, we encumber all their salaries. So on the appropriation side, you'll see like this huge amount that looks spent. It's really just obligated because we have a contract with these people. So it looks like you've spent your whole budget, but then on the revenue side, as you're selling the lunches, as you're getting, so that's the only thing you have to be mindful of. You can look at other areas, and that's something that we do, and that's something I have on the list to go over with you guys in business committee. Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah. Yep.
Outside of the benefits and like the costs of running the program, is like utilization decreasing? Do we know, like, are fewer kids like buying lunch and snacks? Like, is that part of it at all?
So I can put those numbers together as well.
Just curious.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, and then, you'll probably, if you look at any school district and their budget presentation, I'm sure they're going to have stuff like this in here. So obviously, when you have on the revenue side, you can only increase taxes by a certain percent. You may or may not get additional state aid. That's, 2-3%. But then you have salaries that are increasing, benefits that are increasing. I want to make sure everyone understands what you're saying here, though. The salaries is our total salary budget. So this includes additional time, this includes overtime, but they're all numbers that are increasing as your salaries increase, obviously. So this is, if I run the budget, all the salary accounts, this is the total of our budget. And then when you look at benefits, you have to keep in mind, I'm going to talk about health benefits separately, so you understand that, because we have the possibility for the tax levy adjustment, but this is overall benefit. So when the other on the other side with benefits, you have health benefits, but you also have workers' comp insurance that's calculated off the salaries of your employees. You have your pension liability, it's calculated off your PERS pension wages. FICA, all those good things are calculated based off of salaries. So when they're increasing, your benefit increases as well. So, you know, it causes a structural deficit. And I'm sure, like I said, many districts have these problems. You know, this is what ours is right here on paper. So the largest portion of your budget have increases that are outpacing the increases that we're allowed to have on the revenue side. So it forces you to rely on, you know, that $7.5 million we have. We're relying on it to close the budget, but money like that we really shouldn't be using for operating expenses. We should be using it to, you know, replace whiteboards and replace furniture and capital projects that, you know, if that number goes up and down, you can adjust accordingly and not have to cut operating expenses. So again, this is just one of the structural problems that we have. And then again, I talked about the other side of your budget, which is a very small percentage, only 25%. By the time you remove, you know, transportation, tuition, you have to maintain your buildings, you have property insurance, it leaves very little to rely on to run things.
Can I just ask, so when we say, so 25, 26, right, that's our current year.
Yeah.
Some of the contract changes are in effect, right, for this year. Is this 25, 26 number reflective of those contract changes, or what, like, actual, you know what I mean?
So not all of them, and I'll tell you why. So what happens is when you run, and it's going to make it a little bit difficult when you're comparing, when you look at the budget.
Right.
What the budget software does is you have to enter your, first of all, it populates your adjusted budget from the audit. And then, so 25, 26. Then we have to enter our adjusted budget as of February 1st. So that's just a number that's picked because you're most likely entering your budget. But what it does is it allows, like, if you had a certain account and you had a budget, but then for whatever reason you had to transfer money into it, you can adjust that so it's more comparable to what you're projecting for 26, 27, okay? So at this point in time, what you're going to see in our budget is that we have staff moved up to their correct salary, but we're still calculating the retro. So it's kind of like an in-between right now with these numbers.
So this number somewhat accounts for the new salary changes that went into effect this year, but not
Not
totally.
necessarily the retro,
So
correct?
some of that $5 million difference is
Yeah, yes.
somewhat captured, but
Yeah.
not totally yet.
Yeah, and then just so you know, what we do for the 26, 27 budget, because we have settled contracts, we know what, you know, except for the non-unit staff, which is a small number of employees, we know what the 26, 27 guides are, so it's a lot easier to project.
Right.
So what we do is we pull what everyone that's on the payroll right now and what position they're in, and then it moves them up the step for the next year.
Right, but and again, like if we come back whatever months from now, right, and we take a look at this presentation and say, well, you said our salaries for 25, 26 was 82, but really it was really only 80 or whatever. Like, we're just picking a point in the sand, and they're.
Yes.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, yep.
I'm just wondering, in the budget, is there a line item where you put money in for extra time, for extra time? I've been going to the board meetings for years now, and I've noticed more and more that people are being paid extra money. And I'm just wondering, is that a line item that you have money for all this extra money that's being paid out?
So it depends. There is additional time, like stipends. So we budget for that. If we know we're going to have a certain number of 6-period stipends, they're budgeted in the additional time accounts. If we budget for, a certain amount for PD, our summer PD that we do, we budget additional time. We budget additional time, overtime for sure. So that, that's going to increase as the base salaries increase, obviously. Where we don't have a budget, and this is where, we tap into our breakage and that kind of thing, is if you have, you're paying 2 people in essence. So some of the additional time that you approve where, teacher X is writing lesson plans for teacher Y who's out on leave, that kind of thing, that comes out of when you're paying 2 people at a time. Oh, yeah. Mhm. Oh, you mean I thought you meant the budgeting practice. The addition.
Well, I'm saying that if the teacher's out on leave, it seems like they have to be in the agenda, that we're paying people to do certain responsibilities of people on leave. That wasn't the way things were done when I was in school. We had a substitute in there, they did it.
A lot of that is all contractual now, Connie.
In the way.
It's in the contract that you negotiated.
Well, what I'm saying is, if a teacher goes on leave, you have somebody, a long-term person in there, okay? They do all that stuff.
Long-term's different. Long-term people will do those types of things, but everything is contractual. I don't think we should probably conflate this here, because I think this is something we can definitely just pull for you.
We'll definitely, maybe in personnel, Connie, we can dig.
But that's all contractual at this point. There's,
I think I asked them, give us the money in the last couple of years, it's going up.
Okay. We'll do that in personnel.
I mean, like, for instance, I noticed, I don't know, 2 months ago, or whatever, the counselor's out and paying $90 a day.
that kind of stuff. So that one specifically dates back to 2020.
What?
So when a counselor would be out over the 20-day mark, what would happen going back to 2020 is that they would take at that time, the practice was to take the subrate of 180 and divide it either by 2 or by 3 so that they could split up the caseload. So to answer your point,
I'm
that,
just
yeah.
I'll just bring that up.
Yeah.
I'm talking
Sure.
about generally, we're paying people to be doing hourly wages to help out with people that are either not here or whatever. I'm just wondering, is that number getting bigger each year? Because you see a lot of it on the agenda.
Yeah.
We can certainly pull that for you. No problem.
I think that's a good personnel discussion, though. Connie, it's a very good question. Yeah, I'll go to get to that next. Yeah. Yes.
Sorry, I'm not familiar. What's the
Isn't-
vacation
isn't there a
buyback
cap? Sorry.
provision? Like, what's that benefit?
Yeah, isn't it capped?
I think everybody does.
Yeah, it's capped.
Okay.
Janine, isn't that capped at a certain amount?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Isn't that for all of us? That's for all of us, though,
Well,
isn't it?
it was capped before. It was capped before. I think we lowered the cap for new employees, but that's all contractual. Sure, we can do that for you, no problem.
I just have to pull down the details.
And Janine, the benefits, that's just an approximate until you get the correct number in, is that correct?
Yeah, so right now, well, do you want to go to the next slide? This is what I have right now. And so a couple of things I just want to explain. First off, this is the premium only. So I wanted to show this because this is what I got directly from our broker. So it goes off of the people who have health insurance right now. So you take everybody times the premium, and then we have the projected premium and obviously the increase. It doesn't include the employees' contribution, but I do have that calculated because I have to reflect that in the budget. So this number, this is the higher number that you won't actually see in the budget because I have to net it with the employee share, but I wanted you to see the percentages. Now, for us, this is high. It's much higher than it's been. However, state health benefits is 31.9%. For most districts, it's prescription. That's super high right now, and health is better. So this is the renewals that we're getting right now. Again, there's still some negotiation going on, but from where we are right now. So for health insurance, we're in the HIF, we're in another kind of fund for prescription, and then dental, we're on our own. Our broker is also trying to get alternate quotes. So sometimes this is what you see, like, there was leftover from when I did the final adjustment for healthcare, so we added this or we did whatever. But again, this is something that we talked to our legislators about, like, this is just, untenable for districts to have, and this is good. Like, if districts saw this, they'd be like, oh, that's not bad. And for us, it's kind of devastating. Now, we will be able to take a tax levy adjustment, but again, it's not going to be the whole thing, and nobody wants to do that. Nobody wants to increase taxes to cover expenses like this, but it's another example of an expense that's going up a significant percentage, and we only have certain percentages we can increase our revenue. So it's the difference between a 2% increase and a 31.9. So there is going to be, so they give you, because you have a 2% tax increase, they pretty much say you should be able to absorb a 2%. They don't give you an adjustment if we only had a 2% increase. It's anything over and above 2%, but it also has to be under the state health benefits. So in other words, yeah. So we're in between. A good portion, yes. Yeah. It calculates it. I can't say the exact number, and I actually put it in and then kind of like took it out because I wanted you guys to see the banked cap, but it could be around 4 million.
What is that as a percent? The reason I'm asking is because on the last slide, it said 18.64%.
But that includes, that's why I go back to so I wanted to make sure, so this isn't just health benefits, it's benefits in total. So it includes employer taxes, workers' comp insurance, it includes healthcare waivers. Yeah.
The question is, are we able to get to 16.2? You said if we're going above 2%, as long as we're under 39%, can we get 16.2? Are we allowed to go 16?
So roughly 14.2, how's that? Does that work?
14.2 works. So, hold on, wait a minute. So can we, what portion of 18.6% can we?
Only what it gives us for healthcare.
So we can subtract 14.2% from 18.64 from the last slide, and that means the other variable benefits, the tuition, et cetera, insurance debt, then you can't calculate them, correct?
Over and above 2% of this we can take. So like 14.
I think you're I think I'm following you. I think you're conflating the percentage and the dollars. So the percentage we're allowed to increase taxes to marry the benefit, okay.
So if you're in the trending way, go back.
But this,
This number, can we subtract
yeah.
the 14.2% from this number? And that delta, is
Yep.
that what we're
If you're
paying?
adding it to your tax levy,
Is that what we're paying for the critical areas that actually there, is what I'm saying? So the 18.64, how much of that is the next slide? And how much of that can we subtract to get the true number, less 16 or 14.2?
so the tax levy adjustment is going to be around 4 million. I think.
This doesn't represent what the individual teachers have to pay percentage-wise, because
Correct, yeah.
the more years you're working, the higher percentage you pay.
Right.
For the same coverage.
The more you make.
The more you make, the more they take. Yep. Even if it's the same coverage as the other person. Right.
Okay.
My question is, we have 40% that allows for over the tax rate as a health benefit increase. How much is that? And can we get back to the entire, like 18.64 in the last slide? Can we subtract this, the 18.2%?
Yes.
Get the true number
Yes.
of what
If we choose,
outside of the
if we choose to increase our tax levy, it'll give us, that has to stay in our budget, but it'll give us an additional around $4 million in revenue if we choose to do it. So it'll offset some of that increase.
Say this, though, that we're going to have a budget hole no matter what. Even taking all of that, you still have a budget hole, just to make sure we clarify that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Million would be about a 4% increase to the tax levy.
Yeah.
Right.
It's almost exactly the same as your last one. How much was left on the table?
Yeah,
How much we didn't
If you can-
utilize in the last?
because 2%'s about 2.1 million, right? The 2%
It's
cap,
2.1.
about 2.1. So if you can increase it another 4, you're going to be increasing another 4 million. It's going to be about another 4%. So
Correct.
if you took the 2% plus this, you're going to be looking at about a 6% tax levy increase. That getting to what you were asking?
what I wanted to know was, on the last slide you had it's 18%. I wanted to know how much of that, if you decide to go with the free healthcare assessment, what is the true number of
So it's going to be about 14%. The 18. Yeah. Yep.
healthcare adjustment and everything that we can go above the levy? What are we left with that we
Yep.
Sorry.
Okay. That's okay. That's okay.
I'm just going to make this point. Like, because Scott's making a good point, like, now the local tax levy has to cover this. In my view, just like on my soapbox here, this is how the healthcare industry subsidizes their expenses, right? Because now we have to increase taxes to
Yeah.
pay for this stuff. So it's just like, in a general sense, this is what we're all stuck with.
Yeah.
So that these people can be enriched.
And this does not, this goes towards staff, which is very important, but we have to cover this. This is not any educational conversation that we're having that we are
Yeah.
then going to have to figure out. And in sitting, I had a meeting with other school districts and the legislator from Camden County a couple Fridays ago. The recognition is there that the state health benefits, system is not working. They totally get that, and there needs to be a massive revamp of it. It's just an enormous undertaking.
Just to kind of play this out a little bit more. So 2% is the normal cap, right? So that's the 2.1 million-ish. If we took what we think we can get from the health benefit, that's another 4 million-ish, which would
yes.
be another 4%. That's at 6%.
Yeah.
And if by some reasoning the governor allows you to make up of the local fair share, right, like what we left on the table last year, that's probably another 5, if I remember correctly, 4 or 5, roughly 5. So we're looking at like another 5%, so we'd be around 11% if we took it all.
And you would need all that to make this, that would still not probably make your budget from the red to the black.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And they did say that as of right now, they're not entertaining that conversation. I think that whether that decision is fully yours, but I think that we should ask our legislators to advocate for us, because I think that's, they didn't penalize us this year for not being at local fair share, correct? They did not
They did not,
penalize.
no.
In the past, they had. Last year was about 1.3 million.
Yes.
So that's great that they did not do that, but it's still, and while it affects the taxpayers, we're in a spot where our contractual increases are outpacing our ability to raise by, it's not quite double, but it's almost there. I mean, not to use, we did. Yeah. I did, yeah. Yeah, they were great, and they said they would. Now, I don't know if they have the ability of doing that or not, or of winning the argument. But, when you look at a district like ours, where, I'm going to round in terms here, contractual increases are about 3.7 million, and our ability to raise the levy is 2.1. It's a real problem. It's just a real problem. And then if you extrapolate that over the next 3, 4, 5 years and just say to yourself, okay, every year we're starting out in a $2 million deficit right out of the gate, that, we need to be able to raise that. And there's not much we can do at this moment. We are where we are, but that advocation should come so that if you do decide to make that call, you at least have all the information.
I think again, I know I'm new, right? Even towns that have tried to really stop the taxes from really increasing a significant amount year over year, the state has then come in and said nope, and then overruled and increased people's taxes really significantly.
Yeah, there's been a few districts where they honestly forced the raise. Yeah, and I think it happened in just a couple last year.
A few, yeah.
But yes, and they're extraordinary circumstances.
Okay, so I also have enrollment up there. Again, this is our resident enrollment, so it does remove students we're receiving. It removes preschool students. So the actual number in our buildings is higher than this, but this is the resident enrollment that our state aid is calculated off of. So I know that with the board, we need to get more into some of the personnel items that are for executive, but again, I hope that you at least got a feel from some of these slides, just the issues, why we have a structural deficit, why, when we put our numbers together this year, just so everyone knows, we were looking at about a $7 million deficit. We did get additional state aid, but we're still, have a significant list out there that we're going to be going over with you so we can prioritize, but hopefully you understand some of what caused it and what we need to fix in the future. Well, that would be, I was just mentioning, that's where in executive, because it's all personnel. Well, yeah. No, because that's okay. This is resident enrollment. It actually gets backed out because our preschool aid is yeah.
So 7 million deficit was before the additional
State aid.
1.5 state aid, so looking at about 5.5.
Yeah, so we dwindled
Ish.
down our cut list a little bit. Yes, we do that. Yeah. Yeah. So if the whole building is preschool, it can be 100%. If it's not, and you have to figure if there's special education programs, you can't do a full 100%. But all the teachers, all the assistants, and certain other professionals.
Yeah, we as far as the admin cost goes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then there's legal implications there as well. So if you decide to budget, let's say, a director of elementary, you say that you want to budget 75% of the salary, you have to be able to prove that. Yeah, the amount allowable on that column. No, it's a percentage of the grant. We can pull it up. You would have to, if you were putting something in the grant is only pre-K. You could only put the percent of realistic pre-K in there, yes. No. So like you could, for instance, if you take a look at like, I'll use positions like the vice principal of Kindle, you know, and not all of it would probably be allowed because there's special ed kids in the building as well. So you'd have to operate under their parameters to put as much in there as possible. So yeah, it is subsidized. I'll pull those numbers for you so you can see it.
We use percentages based on like the number of students or, you know, back when we were just all at Grenlock, for example, we would go by like the number of classrooms in relation to the building as a whole, things like that. You do, yeah. Mhm.
So let me say it this way, but correct me if I'm going wrong. So I'll say yes out of the gate. But then also remember too that for the grant, there's special ed costs that are not covered. And because we're bringing in more children, the special ed costs go up. So it's a hard answer. So you're doing great things for kids. So yes, you definitely get some of your admin costs subsidized, but not all of the special ed costs are subsidized.
There's a local fair share.
No.
Oh, that's different. It's district-wide,
Yeah.
so, and
That's a reimbursement that we get. But that's not the issue that you're talking about.
And
I'll pull out extraordinary aid and explain it for you too.
Annette, and the thing is that even if we didn't have preschool, we would still have special ed costs in preschool because we're required to provide special ed
Yes, ma'am.
preschool, so that really is a washout. We may be identifying more kids now because of the preschool, but we would have to pay that
Yeah.
regardless of preschool, right?
Yes,
Money.
I want to be careful about the wording though. It might not be completely equal, but we would absolutely have special ed costs that we would incur. They definitely rise, and Janine, make sure I'm speaking accurately, they rise as we open more buildings and put more pre-K in.
Yeah.
They do. But the reality is that that's an amazing thing for our children. It's great for our community. It gives us more jobs that we can placehold, and that's outside of the whole educational system piece.
Yeah, so just like the PEA funding is based on the number of students, as we increase the number of special education students, our local fair share increases. So that's actually a line item in our budget, and then we move it over to work, to add to the grant funds, I guess I should say.
Can you say that one more time?
So as we, our preschool aid increases as we add students, because it's a true per pupil cost that you get. And then the local fair share is what we pay for the special education students. So as we add classrooms and there's seats allocated to each classroom, our local fair share increases.
Real quick, Janine, does the PEA grant cover any of food services for preschool?
We can charge the workers there.
Okay.
It covers the workers,
Okay.
yeah, yeah.
Not the.
Yeah, that's the only downside, I would say, is there are certain things that, like, you really need and it doesn't cover, but.
Does it cover like any of the food costs, or is it just the workers?
It's not food costs, no.
No.
It's just Okay, so I think, in my opinion, I have more slides for you guys, but it's the personnel discussions that we have to have and, you know, the position reductions. and
So we
that
need to
type
go
of thing,
into a second executive.
Yes,
Yeah.
correct.
But
And close
before we,
yes.
before we go into exec, are there any non-executive cuts that we should discuss in public? Like, for instance, clubs, sports programs, you know, things like that,
Yeah, that's,
yeah, pay-to-play type stuff. Is that going to kind of remain the way it is from this year to next year? Is that the vision?
My recommendation, and the board can drive this, I believe that we should utilize pay-to-play. So that was about I think the 150. I think that should go into the budget, and we communicate it fast and furious that start budgeting for what you need. We already have the framework. As far as sports go, we are not recommending eliminations to sports and clubs out of this. I think that there are going to be recommendations for eliminations. That's not going to be some of them, but if the board wants to talk about the merits of that, we can certainly talk about it. Does that answer the question?
Just because I wasn't part of those pay-to-play, would that mean, even though we're introducing pay-to-play, we would be bringing back things at the middle school level?
We are, as of right now, middle school sports is not brought back in here for the sheer standpoint of it would be, it would cost money, and then there are avenues for those kids to play sports in town and other places.
Can you look at the pay-to-play? It seemed like we got caught up last year because of the amount of money that was due, wasn't in October for back to school and this and that. When whoever looks at that, can we kind of look at that differently to have it be maybe throughout the year? I don't know what I mean, just to not have this hard amount at one point for the families.
We can, and I think that would involve just communicating early. So obviously, I think that the final budget adoption was end of April, correct?
May.
End of May?
Middle of May.
Middle of May. I mean, we should be communicating with families as long as the board is in agreement. Listen, we are pay to play. This is what the approximate cost would be. This is when the approximate due dates would be. I think we just got into a spot where we got pressed for time. I think the time issue will solve that, Pat.
Okay. So we've learned from our mistake last year.
Yeah, no, it's a mistake. I think we had a lot going on.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah, I think we can just communicate it.
That's good.
Early and then look, there's going to be issues. There are, and then we're going to have to deal with what happens when kids don't play, and and what are the rules, and not play when they are not paid for. If that makes sense.
So with the middle school, if we're not bringing the sports back, would it be feasible to look at a pay-to-play model for that as well? Just so they had the option.
We could flesh out all the costs when we did this last year. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think the pay-to-play model for middle school sports did not make it run effectively without really charging a high number to parents.
Because of the transportation.
Now, that doesn't mean that you can't do things differently. Doesn't mean that you can't do intramurals that might cover that pay-to-play, but it might have to look a little different. Or, you as a majority could say, Eric, we want middle school sports in here. Come back with a budget that has middle school sports.
When we were at the project evaluation, it was very full-time compared to the year before. And one of the things that came out, and I don't think a lot about it, but it seems to be happening, some of the teachers say too, that a lot of people are being asked for money, right, for this, for that, for this, for that. But I think that, one fundraiser after another, even if parents don't have to participate in it. And I think there's something to be said, I think a lot of that's happening. People just, sort of
Is there, I'm assuming part of the plan is accommodations for folks who have financial, yeah, okay.
That would be entirely up to you. I would think that we have to work on the model. We could bring the model back for a conversation if you're comfortable with that. And I think that we have to give the parents and guardians of the business the cost of what it is.
Is it, is it activities and sports or just sports?
Last year, wasn't it, it didn't matter how many sports you played. You played tennis and basketball. It's still that same amount. That's what we.
We can pull that out and talk about that in committees this week. Is that okay?
And it probably will be crossing, yes, you know, people who can't afford it, we have 25% of our population on premium each month. 25%.
And I think that number was built in to that overall number, knowing that it's a guess. You know, we don't know, will it stymie participation? Maybe. You know,
Yeah,
will
but
it
I
not?
think
We'll have to navigate it to live it.
I think for what, you know, my personal thoughts, and we can talk it in committees, right, is like if we're not giving kids an opportunity to try things, even if there's a cost associated when they're in the younger grades, elementary and middle, then that's not gonna be what they're driving to. So even if it's not the ideal scenario, right, 'cause we're focused on education, just there isn't an opportunity, even if it's not the ideal one, you know?
While we're on the topic, I forgot about, these kids the homeschooled kids that are playing sports, are they paying to play?
If you, currently there's not anyone, I think, going yet, or
Okay.
maybe there's one. But yes, if you implemented pay to play, they would have to adhere to any and all rules set forth.
If we didn't implement pay to play, do they still?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, they wouldn't, because no other child would pay. Great question.
Okay. I'm going to we need to make a motion to go back into executive.
So moved.
All in favor? Resolved that pursuant to Section 8 of the Open Public Meeting Act, the public shall be excluded from that portion of the meeting involving discussion of personnel items. Further resolved that discussion of subject matter in executive session can be disclosed to the public if any action is taken by the board, either at the resumption of the public session, at the conclusion of the executive session, or at a public session at some later date. The executive session will last approximately, we really don't have an idea, say an hour or 2 hours. Let's say an hour and a half. An hour, okay. No action will be taken at this meeting. It's just for inform us. Okay, so, motion, no, we're ready to go. Thank you for those who came out or spoke. Thank you for coming.